A well-drafted trust should protect your assets, ensure your wishes are followed, and make things easy for your loved ones, right? However, even estate planning attorneys can make some mistakes from time to time, and that could lead to some costly problems. So, in this episode, we're going to cover four major mistakes that attorneys make when they're drafting their trusts. Want to make sure you recognize them and avoid them in your own estate plan. Welcome in. This is Complete Estate Planning. I'm Ben George with Nick Rosenbauer of the Rosenbauer Law Office. And we got a good show for you coming up. Again, getting into some of these mistakes attorneys might make. Maybe not necessarily pointing the finger at you today, Nick, but just making people aware of what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of this is not, I make fun of attorneys enough. We don't need to necessarily do that today. There's plenty of material out there. But here are some specific things, because I've had a number of clients, I'd say in the last couple months, who have come to us from another attorney, and we've had to fix or update some things for a number of reasons. And here's a few things that they keep coming up. And, it's good that they came to me because, they had no idea. And who could blame them? Because you're hiring the attorney's supposed to be the expert, attorney's supposed to be doing everything for you. And you cross it off the list. And here were some things that, I said, hey, we need to make sure this is taken care of. And it wasn't. So just a few things that have come up, I'd say, in the last month or two. And I figured we should go over them for all our listeners.
Yeah, we'll do that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And for our audio listeners who've been listening to the show for 3-4 years now, we've been doing it. We always like to kind of get updates on what's going on with you, Nick, with the kids. So I know you've been coaching, and we're in the middle of, I guess, or maybe the end of basketball season. But what's the latest?
Oh, for the zombies, for zombie basketball. Oh boy. So we started off red hot. And, I think when you asked me on a previous recording, we hadn't had a game yet. I was nervous about how this was going to go. But so the league does a good job, at least for the young levels. And the refs actually kind of help guide and help coach. Like they'll say that was a double dribble. Like they'll help them out. And so it's been way better than expected. We are mowing teams down. And I know the biggest lie in youth sports is we don't keep score at this level. The kids do. My son likes to exaggerate. Apparently, on Monday, a couple weeks ago, when he went in, like in his kindergarten class, they say, "Oh, tell me the best thing about your weekend." And he said they won their basketball game 48-2. I was like, I guarantee you that's not true, but we play some in-your-face defense, and for getting 5- and 6-year-olds to enjoy playing defense and like care when they don't have the ball. I don't know. They're kind of after my own heart,
Yeah.
So I've gotten them to do it. I've gotten defense to be fun because I got them to play defense against each other in practice, and we call it zombie defense. I say, put your hands up and go, ugh. And a couple weeks ago, I think we almost shut this team out. Like they have 6 quarters and they almost didn't score at all. We got a little cocky. And the kids, and it's not evil, but one of the kids was like, "Oh, we're scoring every time, and they never score in the game." I'm like, stop. You can't tell a 5-year-old to shut up or shut their mouth, especially one who's not yours, but he's like yelling at him, like, stop it. Sportsmanship, for crying out loud. But then last Saturday, we got a little bit of a reality call. We got to wake up. And there was this other team, and they played defense too. And we didn't know what to do. And what we started doing is they were playing defense. So we'd like run away from them, and they're trying to like Steph Curry. So they're shooting like sideways, right? Because they can't get the ball that far because they couldn't be shooting that far. And this other team played some defense and they had a couple tall kids. And, I was kind of joking with the other coach. I'm like, geez, I wonder if we need to check birth certificates. I got like third graders we're playing against. And then, of course, you walk out and then the person's mom is 6'1", and then the dad's a whole head taller than them. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're tall. So we got 3 games left. We'll see. We had to talk. We had a little bit of a talk about our effort. And what to do if the other team plays defense, because no one does.
Yeah.
So we had to practice offense when we get guarded. So we'll see. Hopefully we got a little dose of humble pie, and it works out for the better. But I got 5 kids who can just flat out run and handle the ball. And they like to defend.
That's rare.
We're doing good. So
rare combination.
You see zombies on your schedule, you better watch out.
Be scared. Be very scared. I love it. Well, lovely hearing about the coaching adventures, Nick, that you have. Let's jump into today's topic. And again, if you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can always reach out 513-463-6789 or log on to CincinnatiEstatePlan.com. Some mistakes your attorney might be making. So let's kind of run through them. As you mentioned, we've got 4 key mistakes that get made in this process. So where do you want to start? What's number 1?
Yeah. So the 4 of them are things that have come across my desk, I'd say, in the last 60 days.
Okay.
The biggest one, and we talk about this, at least for our podcast listeners, we've talked about this over and over again over the years, but not making sure that the funding is done, not making sure that the assets are coordinated with the trust. Most attorneys just prepare the documents, but they don't handle the funding, or maybe they'll handle the deed and then say, go off and make sure you fund your trust. Good luck, right? We've talked before about why that's important. We know that because obviously things are left outside of the trust. They have to be probated, and a lot of the main benefits and what you were trying to get out of doing this all kind of goes out the window. So it ends up being kind of useless. And then but it's a fact of life. So you just got to be aware that a lot of attorneys don't do the funding or don't help you with the funding because it's not fun.
Yeah,
I don't like doing funding. Okay, it is the least exciting part of my job. I'd rather do probates than funding. Okay, and that's saying a lot because some of the probate courts are really ticking me off right now with a couple things. But it has to be done. And again, I'm not going to recap on how important it is, but the whole plan can kind of fall apart if you don't do it. So that's the big one. Obviously, when you're going into it with a lawyer, I would ask that question on what the lawyer's doing and what you are responsible for doing. It's good to know. And obviously, if you have to do it, make sure you know how to do it. Okay. So the bank counts investments, make sure it's all registered to the trust and make sure the beneficiaries are set up with the retirement accounts, life insurance, etc. So just understand if it's your responsibility or the attorney's responsibility. And then if it is your responsibility, make sure you do it. Make sure you do it right. And I think that's a question you should be asking on the front end before you give the attorney your credit card, sign on the dotted line, you're 2/3 of the way through it. So
yeah, that's great. And I guess most people would probably go in just assuming that the attorney's taking care of everything, but as you point out, that's not always the case, right? You might be responsible to taking care of some of this yourself.
Yes, but also, I guess it's okay to rip on attorneys here, but how does
you weren't going to do
it? Yeah, how does the client know any better?
Right.
Because if the attorney says, "Yeah, we don't do that," the clients handle it themselves. How would you know that information's wrong?
Yeah,
you have no way of knowing. You're kind of relying on the attorney to give you the expert advice. So I don't blame clients at all. And for most of these, the onus is not on the client. I want to be very clear. I'm not blaming the client for dropping the ball here. This is something that I think that the attorney should be doing. But again, if you're working with an attorney, you got to be careful that this is being taken care of. And I guess I don't really care who does it, but make sure it gets done.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you could kind of replace that with any aspect of your life, right? You kind of have to take personal responsibilities to make sure things are getting done the correct way, even though you assume that they are, but this is kind of to protect you, to make sure you're aware and at least can recognize some of these things that might come up during the process. All right. What's number 2?
This one is so easy to avoid. And this one really makes my blood boil, but not having a backup or contingency plan, or not having enough of it. So the what ifs, and we've talked many episodes about what ifs and having, beneficiaries and having multiple, people who can step up and be, kind of a batting order, if you will, trustees, everything like that. And there's a lot of them. I was talking to someone yesterday and, they didn't have a backup executor at all. I don't know why anyone thought that was a good idea. And they named the spouse, who 50% likelihood they're going to be gone. It's not even a kid who should outlast you. And I had another one I was talking to also yesterday. We had a run of really kind of cut rate stuff that came through our doors yesterday. But we had one where they only had one power of attorney for medical, one for financial, no backups. What are you doing? Obviously, you have to have backups because what if your spouse isn't around? What if the kid isn't around? Or what if they are sick or they're out of town or they just don't want to do the job? Like, there's a number of reasons it's good to have a backup. Obviously, if there's no backups at all, then a lot of times you're stuck. And depending on what you're dealing with, a lot of times the court's going to have to step in to get someone appointed. So you do an estate plan to pick for yourself and avoid court issues, and then you have to go to court to let someone else pick. I mean, it's really, really easy to do this. So it drives me nuts when these people do a power of attorney and don't have even one backup. And I would say this is for decision makers and beneficiaries too. I was actually, reading, I was reading an estate plan the other day, and it had no language that said if the person who was getting the money wasn't around, here's who it goes to. Like, no one thought to ask that question.
Yeah.
I don't blame the client, but really the attorney didn't sit here and say, geez, I know husband is making wife in charge and wife's making husband in charge. I wonder if one of them's going to die. Like, really? No one thought about that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It drives me nuts. So, I mean, how to avoid this mistake? Don't do that. Right? Have an IQ that at least hits double digits. I would say this to the attorneys. And make sure you have backups. I really like 3 backups. So, like, my estate plan, I got 4 levels. I got my wife, and then I got backup 1, backup 2, backup 3. Am I going to need that many? No. But I know I'm covered.
Right.
I sleep soundly at night, and it doesn't matter, what car crash happens or who goes on the family vacation. I know that we're covered. So one of the things, and this gets back to other stuff, I think it's a red flag when you're talking to an attorney who won't talk about what if scenarios. Like, you'll say what you want, and then they'll say, what if that person isn't around to get the money, or if they're not around to do the job? So I think that should be a red flag. So, just make sure you work with someone who does that. I think that's really basic, and maybe I'm a little, I'm going on a little tirade here, but I've had some of that come up very recently, and it's just, there's no excuse for it. But yeah, you would think that's obvious, but here we are.
Well, again, as you pointed out, this is not something that falls on the client. I mean, it's because, you wouldn't think to ask that, or you would just say, oh, well, they're not asking me about what ifs or backups, so it must not be needed, right? I mean, that's just, you don't do this all the time, so you wouldn't know that. So again, this is a mistake an attorney makes, and one that, again, now you can be aware of and recognize if that doesn't come up, you bring it up and you ask that question, and you make sure you have those backups in place. So good stuff there, Nick. What about number 3?
Okay, so next one we have here, and this is another one. Well, at least for our podcast listeners, we've spoken at length about before, but making sure this is not a one and done. Okay, this is a situation where things change, life change. At least having those checkups or review meetings, kind of checking in with the client every so many years, and making sure that things are up to date. And I'm not saying that you're going to change your mind on things every 3 to 4 years. But obviously, if there's life changes, marriage, divorce, new people are born, people pass away, new accounts, changes in laws, all of that still needs to be looked at. And again, I'm not going to, go into too much detail. We've spoken about that a number of times before. But I would ask your attorney what their kind of review process or checkup process looks like. And I tell people every 3 to 4, you could stretch it out to 5, but definitely in that 3 to 5 year range is a good cadence for checking in. And at least making sure everything looks good. And you know what? If there's an issue, we can fix it. And if there's not an issue, I have clients spend week come in for a review meeting, and I say everything looks good. There's an extra pep in their step when they walk out because they have that reassurance that everything, even though we did this years ago, everything's exactly the way you want it. So I always recommend doing that. And I would ask your attorney what their follow-up or review program or system looks like, because a lot of attorneys don't do it. It is a set it and forget it. It is a one-off. You give me money, I give you paperwork, and I will notarize it for you. So be very careful. A lot of these attorneys, they treat this, like a one-off transaction, basically.
Okay, very good. All right, what's the 4th then mistake that you've been seeing here recently?
And this one, I would say, happens more often with people who are not, who do a little bit of everything and aren't, specialists, who aren't experts, but they'll have kind of just trying to fit everyone into the same thing. So basically everyone needs the same thing. Everyone gets the same will, or everyone gets the same trust. And I've had clients, they'll talk to me and they'll say, oh, we went over this before, but the attorney didn't want to do it. He said it was a bad idea. And I asked him, did they say why? He said, well, he didn't really say why. He just kind of acted like he wasn't going to write it up that way and say, here's the way we always do it. So obviously there's a benefit to having experience, right? And there's a benefit for me being able to say, look, I have done nothing but this every single day for well over a decade. I have seen thousands of families. Here are some ways to go about it. But that is way different than just saying, no, you don't need to do that. You don't need to worry about this. Kind of just putting every peg into the same, round hole, whether it's square, round, triangle, what have you. I don't like the one size fits all approach. Obviously the amount of money matters. The kids matter. If any of them have special circumstances or special needs or trouble dealing with money. I think basically you'll see this when the attorney doesn't care at all about what happens after you're gone and when someone gets the money. They'll just say, who do you want to get your money? How much per person? Who's going to be the executor? Well, a 3-year-old getting money and a 63-year-old getting money, obviously that's not the same. Okay. So, I just make sure the attorney is asking the what ifs and make sure they're understanding what you have and what you're worried about and your situation before they are giving a diagnosis or telling you what needs to be done. So I think that the big way you can keep an eye on this is It will reveal itself when the attorney is telling you what to do and what they're going to do for you, and they don't even know anything about your family yet. They've already decided, and it's kind of a one-size-fits-all. So I'd say that's the big thing to be careful about, and that's probably the way it would reveal itself.
Okay. So four common mistakes you've been seeing: fund your trust properly. You want to include contingency planning, review and update your trust regularly, and of course, you want to ensure that your trust is customized. Nick, for anyone that does go to your website, CincinnatiEstatePlan.com, they schedule a call to get started. I know you kind of go through this, but what is that process looking like, and just kind of what can they expect from that initial kind of meeting and the beginning of that?
Yeah, so we start off right now with a little introductory phone call. It's like 10, 15 minutes. Hi, my name's Nick. I'm a big bad attorney, but you don't need to be scared because I'm not as, I'm not like the guys on the TV show. Because talking to an attorney's scary, right? At least according to what you saw on TV. So that's scary. So we do a quick call. I ask a couple questions. And then we say, okay, here's how it works. We schedule a meeting. We have some information we'll send out to you, just so people don't like surprises because that makes me uncomfortable. So that introductory call is, hi, nice to meet you. And then I will explain what that process looks like. So you'll schedule a meeting. We'll have a packet of information we'll send out to you. And then here's what I need you to bring to the appointment. Here's who needs to come to the appointment. And then when you come in, here's what we'll talk about. Okay. So I like to at least give people a heads up. One, I think it takes the nervousness off because, when you don't know what's coming and you don't know what you're supposed to do and you don't deal with a lot of attorneys, that can be scary. And then also like preparing them, because a lot of my homework, if you will, I call it mental homework. I don't need you to write a 20-page essay, but you need to be prepared when we have a conversation about, who do you think could take care of your kids if something happens to you? Okay, so that requires some thinking. So that's how we do it. We have a quick introductory call. I walk through what happens next, and then we come in and we sit down and we roll up our sleeves and we go over. We get a full kind of picture of your situation, and then we get to a point where we say, here's what we need to do about it, and here's what you need, here's what you don't need, and here's how much. With the process, how much time, how many meetings, how much money, how much paperwork, how much homework, everything like that. So that's pretty much, and then we go from there. Again, obviously that depends on what needs to be done for them.
Right. All right. You can start by going to CincinnatiEstatePlan.com, learn more about the Rosenbauer Law Office there, or you can also call 513-463-6789. Appreciate it, Nick. Thanks for going after attorneys today for us on this episode of the show, as always. But we appreciate you watching Complete Estate Planning. Please subscribe wherever you're watching us here on YouTube. We appreciate that support as well. We'll talk to you on the next show.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by estate planning? The process can seem complex, but it doesn't have to be. The Rosenbauer Law Office is dedicated to helping you protect what matters most: your family, your assets, and your peace of mind. Nick and the team will guide you through every step of the process, making sure you feel confident and informed along the way. Take the first step toward peace of mind today. Schedule an introductory call by clicking the link in the description of today's show.
This show is for informational purposes only and does not provide any legal advice. Information on this show may not constitute the most up-to-date legal information. Please do not act or refrain from acting based solely on anything you hear on this show. This show does not form any attorney-client relationship with the Rosenbauer Law Office, LLC. Please seek the counsel of a qualified attorney before addressing your own estate planning needs.